Speak to the motion.
Speak in favor of the bill, Mr. President.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the interesting aspects of the coronavirus crisis has been people of Kentucky have had quite a civics lesson, because most of us spent May and June and July explaining to our constituents that we, A, weren't in session, and B, couldn't call ourselves back into session to try to gain some input from the people's branch of government into the management of the crisis. So once we got through that civics lesson and explained that little quirk in our Constitution, that we're only allowed to be here in regular session once a year, and the rest of the year we have to be called into a special by the governor, who then sets the agenda. Then we started to work on the development of the senator from Davis's bill, Senate Bill 1. And it's not trying to strip anybody's powers. This bill still allows for a 30-day state of emergency. And the governor would have all of the powers requisite to manage a crisis. But when this original 39A was passed in 1998, I'm quite certain that the General Assembly then didn't anticipate a once-in-100-year global pandemic. It was for regional crises, really, ice storms, floods, tornadoes, etc. So here we are going on, 300-plus days now in the perpetual state of emergency, and the people have been weary of a lot of the restrictions, and they feel like their voice has not been heard in this Capitol. All we could do, Mr. President, is have committee hearings, use whatever limited bully pulpit that we have as legislators during the interim, which does not compare to an every 4 o'clock a day press conference that the executive branch has. That's just the nature of our three supposedly co-equal branches of government. The executive has the bully pulpit. We've got it back now, and we're trying to restore the people's voice to the process. I don't understand the consternation over the question of approval by the General Assembly. That means that the General Assembly meets, and approval means a bill has to be passed by the House and the Senate with a majority vote in favor of the bill. Then there's a process in place to give the governor time to consider vetoing it, and then an override as well. But this would require the kind of communication that we didn't see at any point during this coronavirus crisis. It would require that we would have committee meetings that actually would lead to the consideration of a bill to extend the state of emergency. The governor, whoever he or she is at that time, because this is an institutional bill, yes, certainly brought to us today because of the actions of the current governor and constituents' response to it, as then expressed by members of the People's House, People's branch of government. But the governor and his or her experts would come and testify and bring forth the information and answer questions from legislators who represent 45,000 and 115,000 people back in their districts, and business owners who have been affected or could be affected, or places of worship, or schools. All of those could have their voice heard during the process that takes place in this Capitol, in the legislative branch of government. And finally, Mr. President, I will remind the members that in a Supreme Court decision that most of which I did not agree with, which is also pretty consistent lately, but I digress, the Supreme Court said that the General Assembly could come in and pass a bill in one day. One day. Not the 5 days that we're doing this week with the various priority bills being considered by this chamber and the chamber at the other end of the hallway. One day. Supreme Court said it, so it must be true. There's a reason they're called the Supremes. We haven't exercised that right yet, but perhaps we could under the circumstances that could occur if Senate Bill 1 becomes law. On behalf of my constituents who are screaming to be heard, I urge all members to vote in favor of Senate Bill 1 as amended.